We are headed to the dyno later this week. We're gonna get a baseline of where our tuning stands right now. We're also gonna show you what the Cobb off-the-shelf maps do in stock form as a follow-up to our Cobb AP video that we did a couple videos ago. We're also gonna show you how we're using Dragy and introduce you to that product in case you don't know about it already or want to know more. Gonna show you how we're using V Dyno to get some data and help us tune, help us see the performance of the car. We're gonna put wheels and tires on as well, and we're going to relate the wheels and tires to our performance as well. We're gonna do a little bit of data digging on that too, so stay tuned. I gotta wash the car though. It's got bird doo-doo all over it. Car is all cleaned up, and right there are the wheels. Before I put the wheels on, I'm gonna go do a couple rips down the road because I wanna do some Dragy stuff. I'm gonna show you guys the Dragy and how we use it, but I also wanna compare some third gear pulls in the stock tire setup. We're switching to a much wider tire. We're also switching to an 18-inch wheel from a 20. So we're gonna see the differences in just grip in general on the Dragy and maybe even on a V Dyno. I've done some V Dynos and seen some spikes in the peak torque area of power and torque, and that's definitely wheel slip. So let me show you the wheels real quick. They are Anki GTC 02s. They are 18 by 9.5 with a plus 45 offset. I didn't go too crazy with the offset. I sort of kind of stay as conservative as I can while going as aggressive as I can. Usually that's like my style. You know, I like meaty tires. I don't like to go crazy flush, but I try to nail this one. I looked at a lot of pictures before I bought these, so hopefully these will look good. They are some Toyo Proxies Sport All Seasons. So here's the tread pattern. As you can see, it's obviously an all season. Lots of tread blocks, lots of cuts. And to be honest, you know, these kind of tires are typically better in the colder weather. You know, if you've ever had like an extreme performance summer tire, they do terrible in the cold. They're like driving on marbles or driving on rocks until they warm up and the pavement is warm. They just don't connect. They don't grab the road. These do. So in the wintertime when it's cold, even if it's 50 degrees out, it doesn't even have to be like in the snow or whatever. Not that we're doing performance comparisons in the snow, but anyway, these are gonna grip much better. So anyway, let's go out in the car. Let's do a couple pulls. I'll show you the Dragy and how we use that. The Dragy is a pretty cool device. Check this out. This is a Dragy. It's just a small black box. You charge it through a USB, and you can see I have mine set up right here. This is just a magnet. It has not moved during, you know, second gear, third gear pulls. It stays there just fine. But this is a GPS device, and it monitors a lot of different performance numbers. I mean, a lot of you guys have seen Dragys at this point, but what they basically do is they monitor, like, you can do 0 to 60, you can do 0 to 100, you can do 0 to 130, you can do 60 to 130. 60 to 130 is a really, really good performance benchmark for your car to just kind of see where you stand, how fast your car is. There's, you know, and also how good of a driver you are, you know, shifting through the gears and stuff. I've been using it in custom mode, doing 40 to 75 mile an hour pulls, and those are obviously really, really short, but they're basically third gear pulls, and I start at dead on 2500 RPM every single time, go all the way through the end of the RPM band, and it's basically, it'll just record a 40 to 75 mile an hour run. So let me pull up the app here and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. You can see at the very top right, you can see the density altitude, which is crazy low today. It's pretty cold, and I'm only at 309 feet of altitude. It's 45 degrees out. On your top right, you'll see the blinking satellite Bluetooth signal and the battery level. Tells you you're ready. You can click on that plus button and basically have all these pulled up for different modes that you want to run. I have a custom mode currently being run, and that's 40 to 75 miles an hour and 45 to 115 miles an hour. And that's basically a third gear pull and a fourth gear pull respectively. And it's all automatic. Once you're driving, it just does it automatically because the GPS senses kind of what you're doing. You can check out leaderboards too, which, you know, it shows you the fastest people in your car make, in your category of car. You can see the feed right here shows video even, which is pretty cool. You know, this is basically all the popular stuff going on the Dragy feed right here. And that video you can access right here. You have to have a good satellite signal, which I currently don't. But you can put it in your dash mount and record your video while you're doing your Dragy pull. So let's go out in the car and we'll do a pull. You're just going to go out and do a pull in whatever performance metric you want to do. I'm also going to log this one as well. Once you've done your run, it kind of beeps at you and talks to you. Actually, there's a voice on here, and so it'll tell you whatever type of run it's done. Obviously, once it's safe to look at, you know, pull over into a parking lot or go home, whatever. Make sure you're in a safe spot and look at your time, and you can just, you know, see how fast you've gone. Compare it to other times that you've done in the past. It records the date and the time of when you did it, so it's pretty convenient, pretty cool. Back at the garage, it's time to get the new shoes on and do a little comparison on that 40 to 75 time. I could feel a lot of wheel spin on that 40 to 75 in third gear. So I'm assuming that these new tires with two sizes wider and just the 18s, I think it's probably a little bit bigger sidewall. I think this thing is going to grip better, but we'll see. That's what we're doing this for, so let's find out. Okay, as you can see, we got one wheel off. Here's the old tire. Plenty of meat still left on there, so this will be a good comparison. Obviously, this is the stock 20-inch wheel. And these are Continental Extreme Contact DWS 06 Plus or whatever the heck they call it. But this is basically a performance all season. You can kind of see just the comparison. I mean, obviously the 18 is a lot smaller, a little bit bigger sidewall on this one to get as close to factory total height as possible. What I'm going to do now too is I'm actually going to weigh them. On the scale, 52.7 pounds total. Make sure it stays still. 47.1. So what was the other one? 52.9? What the heck was it? I know this is going to be over 5 pounds per wheel. That's awesome. So I mean, 20 pounds total, but unsprung. So that's great. I've always liked the Anki stuff, and it's a good value. That's a good wheel for the price. So excited to put these on. So these are the lug nuts that we're putting on the car. Black. Honestly, I took these out of the box, and these are like 50 millimeters long. I'm not really sure I like how long these are because they're gonna stick out a little bit. I got some hub-centric rings here. And honestly, I got these on Amazon because I actually don't have a great source for these, and it depends on which size you need too. So some sizes are more common, and I couldn't find, through our suppliers, I couldn't find the right size in the style that I wanted. There's some plastic ones out there, which they work fine too, but I'd rather not put the plastic ones on because if they heat up too much, they start to distort and melt. So I got some aluminum ones. They're basically just dowels. So put those on there, center up the wheel, put the lugs on, and we'll take this thing out again. She's all mounted up. Let's go ahead and do the reveal here. If you know anything about tires, they're the best at the beginning. So I'm excited to see what a brand new set of tires will do compared to that run we just did on the old ones. Oh, by the way, these are 265 tires. 245s are on the car from the factory. So a little bit wider all around. Anytime you're pulling away with your fresh wheels and tires that you put on, you always wonder if you missed something. Of course, the second that I pull away, right after I tell you that usually tires are the best right after you put them on, this thing definitely has some manufacturing finish left on it because it just spun right up. And they're pretty cold on top of that, so hopefully we can get some heat in these things. Seconds, which is not faster than the fastest time on the other tires of 3.18 seconds. You know, I might stand corrected about like brand new tires that are all seasons made for the street. My experiences with a lot of racing tires, you know, they're the fastest when they're brand new. But there might be some layer on this one, on these that, you know, maybe needs to burn off a little bit, and so I'm gonna go back around and try it one more time. 334 on that one, so a touch slower. So this is kind of interesting. This is why we do this. I'm kind of surprised. Honestly, I do have a feeling that these tires will hook up a little bit with a little bit of tread burned off. I will do this again tomorrow and see what the tires do after having driven a handful of miles. Day 2 is here. After doing my first test, I was thinking, man, it's really hard to believe that the wheels are slipping this bad with the new tires, and I really I just kind of became curious about what it could possibly be. I looked into the total tire height, which I tried to nail down as close as I could, just strictly based on tire size. These new tires, fully inflated, are listed at 25.3 inches in diameter. The old tires are listed at 26.8, so I think it is a taller total diameter. The other thing I was really thinking about is the fact that they're so light. You know, you're talking about a front-wheel drive car that makes a ton of torque, relatively speaking. It makes a lot of torque, especially for just an all-season tire and front-wheel drive. So taking 10% of the weight of each wheel that's being driven and making it shorter is probably contributing a lot to that loss of grip. So I think we do actually have a loss of grip. I'm going to go out with a little bit warmer road. It's 50 degrees out right now, about 5 degrees warmer than it was yesterday, and the sun is out, so the road's going to be a little bit warmer. So we'll see what that does. I mean, it seems pretty simple, but it's just not always something you think about all the time. So anyway, this is like good data for us and a good process to go through to see kind of what the effect of tires and wheels does, especially on a Type R where, you know, it just makes a lot of torque. It's front wheel drive, what this stuff can potentially do. So you lighten the wheels, you get a smaller setup, and you could lose grip, but we're about to verify that again. So let's go out on the road and do another pull. Man, grip is not as good with these tires. Actually, I don't know if I can blame it on the tires at this point. I think it's just the entire combination of the shorter wheel, smaller wheel. It's a wider wheel, but it weighs less. It's shorter overall, and I think there's just too much torque, and it's just spinning it's spinning it up because of how light and small it is compared to stock. At this point, I've got to think that the stock setup is helping you with forward grip in this front wheel drive car. You know, that's just my assumption. The road quality is better right now. The air is actually better and the road is warmer. And you know, we just went 3.33 seconds, so it's basically identical to yesterday. So really interesting to see what the difference is in the wheel and tire setup. At this point, this is a lower grip wheel and tire setup, even with brand new tires, wider tires, and a smaller wheel. Pretty interesting there, but I don't really care. They look a hell of a lot better, so we're gonna keep them on there. We'll put the coilovers on and make the setup really nice. At the end of the day, if we really are trying to achieve just grip and we're going to the track or something, obviously the tire choice will matter. And even in a drag scenario, you're going to be running different tires as well. And maybe that means, you know, you try heavier wheel setups on a drag setup where you just simply need forward traction and that's it. In the lower RPMs when you get going. So I don't know. Anyway, good stuff to know. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Dyno Day is here, folks, so buckle up. Yeah, we're going over to English Racing, which is a really cool shop to be this close to. They do some stupid, crazy builds. Follow them if you don't already, but yeah, they're a pretty awesome resource to have right down the street. I'm like 5 minutes away from them. I drive like basically through neighborhoods to get to them, which is kind of cool. So, but anyway, let's head on over there and get this thing dynoed. While the car is warming up, I figured I'd show you guys some PRL, some OLM. The PRL is very important, actually. It's the intake, which we pretty much need right now. There's two things we absolutely need to continue doing what we're doing, and that's the fuel pump and an intake with a bigger MAF housing, because we've maxed out the fuel pump already, or you know, you can max it out. You can really make the fuel pressure dip pretty hard at peak torque already in stock form. And you can hit MAF cut. You can hit a full 5 volts on the MAF at high RPM in stock form as well, which we have been kind of tiptoeing around, trying to keep it below that. So the intake will help, so I'm happy those are in. Got the coffee. Can't do a dyno morning without coffee. Can't do really any morning without coffee, let's be real here. Pick up some petrol on the way. You see that? That's what happens when you have too many cars. You forget. This is a good little reminder of how much you pay for gas. It's probably less than me. Unless you're in California, that's probably about the only place higher than here. Just trying to get going on this Type R. Everybody screaming gang, gang, gang. No fuck come and get you, you gon' tell them the whole gang. Here we go. I've got the dyno results right here of all 3 runs, back to back to back, stock, Cobb off the shelf, stage 1, and our own custom tuning. Let's go ahead and look at the results. As you can see, the blue line here is stock. That's a completely stock vehicle, no hard parts, nothing, stock tune. The green line is the stage 1 off-the-shelf map from Cobb. We're using the 91 octane map because we're using 92 octane gas. That's the best available to us here where the car is. If you had 93, you could run the 93 map, obviously, but we don't want to run a 93 map if we have an octane lower than the 93 map, because it does change some timing values and make it a little bit more aggressive, and we don't want to cross that threshold into the knock territory there. So, and then you can see the red line is our own custom tuning. So if you are a person that wants to buy an Accessport, plug it in, press a few buttons, flash a new map, go have fun, there is plenty of fun to be had just doing that. The Cobb Stage 1 off-the-shelf map is ridiculous in terms of how much power and torque you gain. You can see the amount of curve in between the blue and the green line is crazy. I mean, it becomes a completely different car. One thing to note on this dyno graph right here, on this day, the Cobb map just didn't want to see something that it was seeing on the dyno up here, and it kind of cut some power down. So this doesn't happen out on the street. That's not our experience in the data logs and out on the street. Sometimes the Cobb map does just keep kind of chugging along up here. So this is kind of a little bit of a different dyno map than you'd see on all the stage 1 tunes. But regardless, our red line of our custom Edge Autosport tuning obviously takes it a step further. You can see in the mid-range, right when the torque hits and the boost comes on, there's about 25, 30 more pound-feet of torque up here to be had from a custom tune, which is just, raising boost, kind of letting it breathe a little bit more, getting a little bit more aggressive. And then even up at the top, there's still some gains pretty much all the way throughout. So that is a stock tune versus Cobb tune versus Edge Autosport custom tuning on a completely factory Type R. We have one last thing to do that I mentioned earlier on in the video, that is kind of experiment with some V Dyno. If you don't know what V Dyno is, it's a software that's free that you can download and basically input a data log into it, upload a data log into the software, and it will kind of spit out how much power and torque you make. Now that's going to be based on a data log. It's technically supposed to be a dyno, like a dyno plot, but it's not taking place on a dyno. It's taking information from a data log and putting it into a formula and spitting out a power and torque curve. I like to use this for comparison's sake. You don't want to use V Dyno as gospel. It's not supposed to be a true accurate measurement of power, but it can be a very accurate measurement under the right circumstances. Really, really good grip, perfect grip. A really, really, really flat road, right? So all those things that contribute to an ideal dyno run where the car is strapped down and there's not a whole lot of inconsistencies, it's going to spit out a more accurate number. But the most important thing is, if you can pick a place to do data logs and do them in the same place every single time, you have the ability to compare back-to-back-to-back runs as you're tuning the car, or as you change tires or wheels, kind of like we did earlier in the video, as you put new parts on, as you want to see like what temperature and different density altitudes do to your power output. You can experiment with all those things when you have the same consistent run that you're doing in the same consistent spot. So that's what we use V Dyno for. Now what I'm going to use it for today is I'm going to take our dyno run from English, and I'm going to go do another 4th gear pull on the street, plug it into V Dyno, and I'm actually going to just customize the settings to try to get it as close to the dyno jet numbers from the actual dyno as I possibly can. And that way we kind of have a good baseline going forward of, this is exactly what a dyno run would be like under perfect circumstances, and make the V Dyno match it just right. I might have to fib the tire height settings a little bit, but I'll start with as accurate as I possibly can and then adjust from there to get it to match. Take it with a grain of salt, but we're going to kind of line up our V Dyno and our regular dyno so that we can move forward with some street tuning and try to get an accurate view of what the car is doing out on the street compared to a dyno. So let's go make one more full 4th gear pull on the street. We're going to plug that data log into V Dyno. I'm going to show you how to set up your V Dyno as well. once you are back at your desk and you have your data log in your computer files, go ahead and open up Virtual Dyno. Now, if you've already used Virtual Dyno, this is probably still going to be valuable to you. Maybe I'm going to give you a suggestion that you haven't thought of in the past on how to use Virtual Dyno. So you can probably skip this little first part that is more of a tutorial on just how to download it and how to set it up. But for those of you that have never used Virtual Dyno, go to this URL right here, barnhill.bitbucket.io. Go ahead and download it. There's no spam, there's no ads, there's nothing goofy. This is just straight, free software here. Go ahead and download it and it'll bring you to this screen right here once you open up. This is obviously a very blank slate. You're going to start off by editing your car, and especially if you have a Type R. They don't have Type R information loaded into Virtual Dyno, so you need to edit your car. You're going to go over here, click on Car Editor, put in your information. Now for the weight, this is where it's important to set it up correctly, but understand that you're probably going to make some changes to this once you get into the software, and I'll go over that in just a second. So the weight of a Civic Type R is published at 3,121 pounds, at least for the 2020 model that we have. So the weight is going to be that plus, at least gas. And right now we have a full tank of gas, which is over 100 pounds. You can start off with, wherever you think the weight is going to sit at. And I'm not even sure the curb weights that are published. I don't even know if they include like oil and coolant and stuff like that. So it's probably going to be higher than even this, but we'll get into that later. Don't account for body weight, just do the car weight here. The drag coefficient of an FK8 is 0.26, at least what I looked up. The frontal area on a two-dimensional graph, the front area of the car, how much area would the car take up two-dimensionally? I saw that people were reporting anywhere from like 24.7 on the high end to 21 point something on the low end. I tested both 24.7 and 21 something, and it varied the horsepower by 8. So that's not a huge factor in the difference between, the right one and the wrong one. I wouldn't worry about frontal area too much. Use a value that you can find out there. You use 24.7. That's perfectly acceptable. Tire diameter is something that you can probably find out on the manufacturer's website. So let's go to Toyo 265/35 R18s. The inflated overall diameter is 25.3. So we're going to use 25.3. Those are the tires we have. So go back to Virtual Dyno, put in your number, 25.3, whatever yours is. You can find out the gear ratios. Obviously, you're going to select manual. Find out the gear ratios the same way. Just go online. This is from a Honda website. Here are all the gear ratios that you're going to put in. Obviously, reverse, you don't need to put that in. Make sure the final drive is what you put in right here, final gear. And then you save it. Once you have yours saved, you're going to click on Load Runs. You're going to select the data log that you're going to observe here. It'll load the data log, but you have to apply that data log to a car. Once you have your car in there, don't go to Honda. It does not save your custom configuration in that vehicle. It saves it into the custom folder. So you're going to go to Custom, Honda, Civic, double click on the one you just created. It allows you to select the gear. This is a 4th gear pull. You can see it already has the tire height in there. It already has 3250. Occupant weight, I'm a shameful 180 pounds. And that's your kind of start point here. You're gonna end up wanting to play with it. I'm gonna play with it a little bit, and the reason why is because I want this thing to come as close to matching that actual dyno run as possible, just so I can kind of have like a good baseline for every time I do a data log. Now here's the thing. This is taking information from a data log. It's not taking it on a dyno and how fast it's spinning a roller. It's taking information about how fast it's making your car go, which has to do with the street that you're on, which has to do with the wind that is present that day, which has to do with the temperature and how much power the car is making at that time. There are a lot of subjective issues with doing a virtual dyno. So you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt and understand what you're looking at. So right now, the peak horsepower for that last data log is at 303 and torque is at 389. We're actually making a lot more horsepower than this according to the actual DynoJet, but less torque than this. So let's talk about why that is. First of all, we need to understand that the peak horsepower registered at 5,500 RPM out on the street, whereas it was at 6,400 RPM on the dyno. Well, you can see over here, 62, it's still fairly within range, 303 to 292. You're plus or minus 10 horsepower. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm just kind of seeing curve differences here. And then torque, let's talk about this torque curve a little bit. Obviously this is very peaky compared to the Dyno Jet run, and I'll pull that up right here. You can see it's a lot more flat up here than it is on the virtual dyno. The reason why is because of wheel spin. You might not even be able to feel it, and especially in fourth gear, it doesn't really feel like a ton of wheel spin, but it is happening. You're not strapped to the ground like you are on a dyno, and you're not in a controlled surface with, like knurled rollers that are gripping the tire a little bit better. That's why you get wheel spin. You could have a road that's a little bit dusty, that isn't quite as grippy. It's not new, and it's not as flat. It's not as smooth and nice. So that's why this is another reason why you have to understand that this is subjective. So what I like to do is I'll take this torque curve and I think, okay, if it didn't peak, if it kind of tapered off like our dyno run did, it would probably sit right around here at that peak. At 3,500 RPM, it'd probably be around 360, which is, or at least on this graph, which is lower than what we saw actually on the dyno. The one thing I'm going to try to match is horsepower, and the reason why is because you are far less likely to have wheel spin happening at 6,000 RPM in fourth gear than you are at 3,500 RPM when the turbo is really boosting up quickly and torque is really coming on hard, especially with our smaller wheel and tire setup, our lower diameter than stock. It's going to spin those up quicker. So I'm going to try to match the horsepower number closer than I'm going to match the torque number. I'm going to do that through the weight. Let's just add 100 pounds here. You can see it bumps it up to about 326 wheel horsepower, much closer. Now you can say, well, you're saying it's a weight that it probably isn't. I don't know, maybe it is 3350 if the stock curb weight is not accounting for all the fluids in the car. I probably have a handful of little things in the car that contribute to the weight. I don't know. This isn't very important. What's important is that you do it in a repeatable way. You do it in the same place all the time so that you're not looking at two different graphs from two different places and comparing them. The other thing about my run is it is on a tiny, tiny downhill slope. I mean, like very, very small, less than a degree. So you have to take that into consideration. In order to compensate for that, I'll put a higher car weight because technically the car is going faster, all things considered, if you're on a downhill slope than if it was on a straight slope. I'm just going to use 3350 as kind of my marker. It is a tiny bit warmer today than it was on the dyno, so I'm probably getting a little bit hotter air. I have the hood closed, right? So the intake air is a little bit warmer. So it's technically probably making slightly less power. The tire height I don't want to change as freely because that's kind of changing gearing. So you don't want to change gearing because that kind of just takes the whole curve and puts it in a different place and changes it in a non-linear way. So you want to try to stick with a tire height that's as accurate as possible. Mess around with the weight. That's kind of my general philosophy. This is where I'm going to leave our settings. This is what I'm going to save the settings at so that we can come back, and every time I do a pull in my spot in fourth gear, these are the settings I'm going to use. There's a couple other tools inside of Virtual Dyno that you can play around with. You can take this data analyzer and plug in a lot of different values that you are logging and plot them on a curve, which is kind of fun to see. You can save this to your computer and post it online, do whatever you want with it, save them over time so you can compare, go back and forth to before you modded and after you modded and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, this is how I'm using Virtual Dyno. I wanted to get the number to roughly what it is on the dyno, and that way we kind of just have a baseline of like, this is probably what the car is doing on the street, or as close to it as possible. Another thing is, keep in mind, you want to compare the RPMs. So our peak RPM was at 6,400 RPM. This is at 312. That's not as accurate. The car acts differently on the street, and it did on this day. It really drops down hard at 6,800 RPM. You don't really live at 6,800 RPM, so it's not super important to know where your car is at 6,800 RPM, but 5,300 RPM definitely is close. Now, if you go, so at 5,300 RPM, we're making 326 to the wheel. Go over here to 5,300 RPM right here.
go up, and we're really close to 326. I mean, it's like right in the middle. This is probably a very accurate representation of what it's doing out on the street, including the wheel spin. So you just don't want to take that 422 pound-foot number. You know, you don't want to take that to the bank. It's not really making that. It's just, that's some wheel spin there. So look at this subjectively, and that is what a virtual dyno can do for you. You know, take a data log and see how much power your car is making, or roughly how much it's making.
Hopefully that helped all you guys out. On the next video, we're probably going to do intake next. I do want to get to some suspension stuff and some aesthetic stuff as well, just to kind of make this thing really, really nice and clean as we continue to do these videos. But intake is definitely next. We are just maxing out the MAF voltage at the top, and we really need that room to be safe. Fuel pump is definitely going to be right in line after that as far as performance mods. So stay tuned for those. We'll catch you on the next one. Make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and we'll see you on the next Type R video. Thanks, guys.